Thank you.
Okay. Yes. We both forgot. Bless you. Thank you for whoever that was. Thank you for doing that. All right. So here is the biggest question about the CRT. Let's put in the chat the biggest question you have about CRT, the biggest question that you like answered. And I'm not sure we're going to answer it tonight. Like the Stone said, you can't always get what you want, but you might be able to get it. And remember, there might be a little after party we can deal with those issues. But we have some things we want to get to. So put your biggest question about CRT in the chat. The question you most want answered.
Yeah, we will definitely save the chat, and it will definitely influence how we plan our training. Any future trainings or free events that we have, we will try to address the actual
training
questions.
is on October 23rd, and we're gonna give y'all a discount code as a benefit of showing up tonight. It's useful to try to get them to people to define their terms. Somebody's conflating CRT with other stuff, misconceptions. Those are all excellent questions. How do you define it? How do you diffuse emotional energy? Yep. All right. How do I convince people that I'm not teaching CRT, but rather empathy, understanding, and love? Yep. These are excellent. Somebody said, how do I separate the CRT, SEL? Oh, SEL, social emotional learning, right? Yeah.
Yep, that's the one.
How can you diffuse
where we teach people to be decent human beings?
And why is this thing so exclusive? The founder theory was very pragmatic, if not pessimistic.
Funny you should ask.
Yep. Okay. All right. So feel free to add other questions, but this is really helpful to us to know. And again, we have a program we want to go through. It's useful to hear. I'm usually willing to have a little after party for people. So if we don't deal with those questions here, we deal with some of them at the end. Okay. All right. Ooh, question still. I want to learn what is it practically people are arguing against. So there's a lot of good stuff. Okay. So Allison, shall we move forward while people are continuing that?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about CRT and give some of the basic information around it.
All right. So here is, I'll try this briefly. We could talk, this could be a half hour, and it ain't gonna be a half hour because we want to show y'all the method of transforming these conversations. Here is the core of it. Critical race theory is a school of thought created largely by this woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, which is an esteemed professor at UCLA now. She used to go to Harvard as a law student, and she, together with other folks at Harvard, recognized that there was a gap between our supposed colorblind society of the late 70s, early 80s, and the outcomes we were getting. So they created the whole field of law and policy studies, looking at what's going on with that. And they eventually called that critical race theory. So it's that whole school of thought taught in law schools and policy schools, mostly law schools, it's complex, but it is a way of looking at the evolution of law and policy through the lens of why are there still big racial disparities. That's what but it's really focused on that school, that level of academic discussion. Now, obviously, analysis includes analysis of systemic racism and a multi-layered analysis of that. So that happened. Now, what happened a couple of years ago is that this savvy person named Christopher Rufo at the Manhattan Institute, he recognized that the residual, essentially white grievance that has been stirred up by Donald Trump as a general matter could be transplanted and put on to this thing called critical race theory. And so, and of course, all the advances in education they're not equal across the country, but that promote a kind of a broader understanding of racism. He said, let us rebrand all of that under critical race theory. In fact, he has a tweet that basically says, we're going to rebrand, we're going to make toxic all of these insanities that people on the left are doing and call it critical race theory and make that toxic. He was dumb enough to tweet that out. And so we know this was a purposeful effort to rebrand this thing called critical race theory, which again is like something that was taught and thought about in law schools. So the effort has been to rebrand this esoteric legal set of legal theory, and to make it stand for anything that gets a certain amount of the country's hackles up about talking about race and racism, and then to attach it to we're teaching our children that, to get them even more agitated. So the effort has been a purposeful attempt to rebrand something. It's been pretty successful because you have these people, as your chat says, coming to school board meetings and coming to classrooms demanding that you stop teaching CRT, right? So that is an important part of the background of this that is important to know. So a somewhat charitable way of looking at it is that you have people, and let's let Christopher Roof off. Maybe he sincerely thinks that the way that we teach kids about racism is an overreach and bad for children. But certainly, maybe he really thinks that, and maybe it's not just a political thing. But certainly, all across the country, political operatives have recognized that you can mobilize people around this issue and to generate energy toward the Republican Party and toward conservative candidates and toward Mr. Trump. And so you have a combination of maybe, since you got those people who are operatives trying to do that, and people who are ginned up and agitated and made agitated by that. So we can hold them differently morally, but there's at least a mix of that mix has taken place. And as we try to approach the issue, we need to account for that. Anything else
and
add to that?
Yes, we need to not forget that there are also a whole lot of moderate people who have some racial anxiety, that are hearing these arguments and seeing these things and wondering, is this accurate? That it kind of rings true with them, even if they wouldn't say it out loud. And so the way that we respond to them and the way that this is happening in the public square is affecting them. And so it's really important to thread this needle with how we engage them, so that we don't just sit by and let them take over, but we also don't make the problem worse by looking, by looking like we're going too far, that we're extremists on the other side simply by opposing them. So we have to thread this needle here. And so that's why it's so important that we try to enter into this with an approach of dialogue and actually change the conversation.
So so we can speed up a little bit. That was great, Allison. Thank you. So our suggestion is that, I don't know how many of y'all saw Fight Club, but the first rule about talking about CRT is you don't talk about CRT, because the CRT is a valid school of thought that's taught in law schools. And I don't think it's useful for you to spend time defending CRT. You can make an argument that some stuff that we think of as anti-racist education is about CRT, but I wouldn't concede that ground. I would suggest that you try to shift the conversation away from, is CRT good or bad? Are we teaching it as good or bad? To, what do we want to teach our kids about race and racism? Because everybody cares about that question, and you're not trapped in the box of defending something that they have rebranded. And then you're having a conversation about what is it and what is it not. That's not helpful to you. That's not helpful to you trying to find whatever common ground you might have with somebody on the other side. Talking about what CRT is not helpful. What you want to talk about is, what do we want to teach our kids about race and racism?
I hope that makes sense to everybody. So that's our first main point from tonight. I have to admit, I didn't know what Fight Club was, and so I had to Google it. So
right. So one thing to add before we move forward, is that unfortunately, and we can talk about why in the after part if you want, is that the whole anti-CRT thing has been lumped together with anti-vaxxing and anti-mask mandates, because essentially there's a whole bunch of white folks who think that there's too many people pushing on them, telling them what to do, and it's all getting mushed together. So another challenge is to separate those out, right? Now, so I'm just to clarify, we recognize that that's complex, but I think that you're likely to have, if you disagree with somebody about CRT and vaccines and masks, it might be more possible for you to have a productive dialogue about CRT. You just got to shift that. So part of your challenge rhetorically is to, let's put aside for a moment the other stuff. We can talk about that separately. And that might be, those are hard enough conversations. The CRT thing, there might be some common ground if you shift the conversation to shift the conversation to, what do we want to teach our kids about race and racism?
And so it's important for us to kind of think about some values related to race in youth education, and get this down to a values lesson. And so we're going to do some polling now around that. And here's our polling question. Again, we would really like it. I hope that you see the polling question on your screen and that you can just choose an answer. I'll read them out for you. Which of these most resonates with you in relation to kids and racism education? I don't want kids hating themselves because of who they are. I don't want kids only seeing each other as members of racial groups. I don't want, maybe you mean I don't like disliking the community they belong to because of,
Yeah, that was
racial issues.
Yeah, I don't want
And
I don't want kids to dislike the community they belong to because of racial issues. Right?
okay, yeah.
You know, that affected Black kids for a whole long time, right? Disliking their community because they're taught that their community is bad.
Yeah, I had a foster child tell me he did not want to be Black anymore. He wanted to be white.
And or if your answer is none of these resonates with you, then press that.
Oh, it's growing. We're up to 14.
I mean, we got Allison.
You want to play the
Let's play the music.
play the music, the Jeopardy music. Bom 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 bom. Doo, doo,
All right, let me see what we got, Allison.
we only have 42% participation rate. I'm sad.
We're not going to keep playing the commercials for the pledge drive. We got to move forward.
Okay, here are the results.
Okay. So we can see about a third of us really don't want kids to hate themselves because of who they are. A little more than a third don't want kids to see only members of each other as only as racial groups, to each other only as members of racial groups. And about 1 out of 6 of us don't want people to dislike their community that they belong to because of racial issues. And 16% said none of these resonate. So we got it. Okay. So we're going to ask it now. We're going to do something. We're going to do this the whiteboard screen share. So the question that we want you to think about when I get the whiteboard up is, as we will discuss, our approach to persuasion is based on creating connections with people on the other side. So as you think about creating connections with somebody, host disabled participant screen sharing. So you need to, how do we get out of that, Allison? So I'll say, let's do it in the chat. Okay?
Nope.
What?
Nope.
So here's the question, put in the chat. If you think about,
nope.
Don't do it.
You're the host. So screen share.
New share.
Nope. Wrong one.
How's that?
There we go. Okay. Now, in order for people to do this and participate, you at the top of your screen, you will see you are viewing the real David Camp screen. Right beside that is view options. And if you slide down, you will see the option to annotate. Click on annotate, and then you can choose text and you can type in a box. You'll see mine show up in just a second. And you see I typed hi there on the screen. So once you have activated annotations, you should see a toolbar at the top. You click on text and you can type.
You put on, and the question is, what emotions come up for you as you think about connecting with people on the other side of this issue? As you think about mobilizing yourself, again, try to do a text instead of a draw. As you think about that, what emotions come up for you as you think about connecting with people on the other side? of this issue. Nervous but determined. Very good. Somebody did it. Yay. I feel a little disgusted. Frustration, anxiety, frustration, hope, frustration, disappointment, discouragement. Yep. I wouldn't know what to say. Helplessness, frustration, discouragement, fear. Y'all are honest. Y'all are honest up in there. When you put your thing down, if it's on top of somebody else's, you can feel free to just move it so we can all read it. Anxious but still necessary. Right. Anger, anxiety, fear of damage to relationships, but committed to the conversation. Excellent.
Look at that.
Rage.
Look at us using a whiteboard.
Look at us. Look at us. We never used the whiteboard before, so we're happy with ourselves right now. All right.
It's actually kind of fun.
Remain calm. All right. Okay.
If you're having trouble getting into text and not drawing, if you'll look at the top and click on text, you'll be able to type instead of draw.
Concerned I can make things worse rather than better. Right. Frustrated because I've tried to bring both sides together, and the CRT side has so many rules of engagement. Okay, so it's complicated, right? So that's why we need robust strategies that we actually know how to practice, and that's what we're going to show you the strategies tonight, and a week from Saturday we'll have a chance to practice them. All right, so I'm going to save this. Save as a PNG. All right, so we've saved it. Okay, so we're going to take this down. So
wow, I'm very impressed with us. We made that work.
All right, so what's the reveal, Allison? You can make the reveal, or should I do the reveal?
So those of you who are feeling anxious, nervous, and concerned about all of this, and even I'll have a little confession here. I'm the one that wrote a little disgusted, because it does make me feel a little gross to think that I have something in common with people who are behaving so vilely out in public and are being so hateful to our elected officials, who are trying to just do their jobs, most of them who aren't even being paid. But the truth is, when we answered those values questions about not wanting our children to be only thought of as a racial group, or not wanting to be upset about being in a community, those are the values that the anti-CRT group are leveraging to make their arguments and to build their movement. And so we have values in common with the other side, and we have to use that to our advantage, because that is the best practice in persuasion, is by first finding a way to connect with someone, and doing that at the values level is actually the best way to build a bridge.
So Deborah said about the values better frame is what you do want than you don't want. So I get that. And as a general matter, that is more, that is a general matter that tends to be more persuasive. And I've done workshops about progressive people reframing stuff in terms of what they do want as what they don't want. So that's something really wise about that. And when people are agitated about something they're trying to prevent, and you can meet them, it's useful to do that, because the meeting them is a critical thing for persuading them. So I get what you're talking about, but shifting to, that's almost a tactical question about how you manage that conversation. Okay.
Did you see Bill's comment? David, do you want to address that, or do you want me to?
I didn't see it, but let's see. It's not a red herring. They don't come from being white supremacists. Okay, so I get you, but I think we can all agree, if the fear that kids would learn something and hate themselves, like, we all don't want that, right? I don't want little Susie hating herself because she's white. Frankly, I don't want y'all hating yourselves because you're white, because people who hate themselves are not effective social change agents, right? So, that's great and has some wisdom and is certainly wonderfully snarky. And we don't want kids hating themselves. And so the question is, can we articulate a set of values, either what we do want or we don't want, that's so aligned with them that it makes us not these weird other people they got to be the enemies of? So that is why we asked that question. I'm going to shift now to talking about the 3-part strategy that we will teach people how to do. And we will go through this for the rest of our time together, but just to be really, really clear about it. So, and I'll also tell you how we're going to do it in the training. In the training we do in a couple of weeks, you're going to come out of that training with a 3-minute statement that you might make at a public meeting, but it has 3 parts. And if you're really concerned about managing a conversation, what you do is to manage the conversation in those 3 phases. But because of the time constraints of a 3-hour training, we're going to focus, and it's hard enough to get people to articulate the 3 parts. It would take too long to teach you how to work a conversation. But the core difficulty is in just coming up with that. Here are the 3 parts. The 3 parts is there are values I share in common with you on the other side. And we just gave you some of the three values that 3 of the values that they most talk about in their manuals, which we have reviewed. So we're just not making that up. We reviewed their manuals, and those are 3 of the things they most talk about. So step 1 is to articulate that I share some values with you. You're fostering a connection. Part 2 is that you own up to your own racist training and then give an illustration of how it sometimes comes out of you. Because remember, what we're trying to do is to productively disrupt the conversation by doing some truth telling. Like, I know racism is a problem because I was trained, my grandmama taught me this, and I mostly rejected that, but I still find it comes out X, Y, Z. Does that ever happen to you? And you basically, you do that, and you invite/dare people to be honest about that. Because part of what this whole context is, part of the dysfunction is they're saying that the real racists are you and people like me, and you're saying the real racists are them. But in fact, we all are affected by the white superiority virus. And so part of the transformative move is to say, as we talk about what we teach our kids about race and racism, let's talk about what we were taught and how it still sometimes exists within us. That's part 2. Part 3 is to talk about what you're worried about if the CRT bans rashly executed, what it prevents happening, particularly what it prevents happening in regards to what children, especially white children, how it will hide them from seeing progress. Because one of the things that is a big subterranean dispute is whether we're acknowledging progress enough. So you want to acknowledge either progress that you want your kids to see in the society, progress in their community, or in the nation. So that's the 3 parts that we suggest that you learn how to do. Again, you can implement those in a conversation, but you can also do those in a 3-minute statement, and you will see that in very shortly. Okay. So what I like to do,
time for video.
What should we add? What should we add to that?
Okay. I think it might be helpful if we show the video example of someone executing this in 3 minutes. Because
you want to play the whole thing, or play it in parts of the whole thing?
Well, it's 8:42, and so we're running a little behind.
All right. So we're gonna what you're gonna see. Okay, so can you see that, Allison?
Yeah, I can see it fine, and maximize it, and then well, let's make sure we have audio.
Somebody knows the Ken Burns effect in iMovie.
Good evening. I'm a parent of a child in this district, and I agree with many of the ideas that I've heard tonight. I have a lot of agreement with people opposing what they're calling critical race theory. For example, I think this nation is a fundamentally good nation. I consider myself a patriotic member of our community, and I want my children to see themselves as part of a long patriotic history of people who've taken a stand for freedom, such as John Adams and Abraham Lincoln, who joined with others in the fight against racism so that our nation can become less divided. Our kids need to understand our full and true history so they are not afraid of it. At all points in American history, there were people of all colors who wanted the racial situation to stay just as it was. It helped them. And there were people of all colors who wanted to heroically push for changes so that America could include everyone as it says it does. Now we need to make sure our children learn that full history so that they can learn about heroes, including some who look like me. Now, I can see the progress that I have made, just as I can see the progress our nation has made. But to see that progress, I have to be honest about what has happened in the past. Now, when I was growing up, my community taught me to act like I was colorblind and to not see color. Even though I tried, I knew in my heart that that wasn't true for me, and it wasn't for them either. Even as a kid, I could see the way that non-white kids were looked at, talked about, and treated differently. And I regret that I sometimes did that myself. Now I know that the colorblind teaching of my community just keeps me from owning up to the racial prejudice that has seeped into me. Now look, I'm not a racist person, but just like everybody, sometimes I have racist thoughts, though I don't like to admit it. For example, sometimes when I see a news report about crime, I sometimes find myself thinking, what's wrong with these people? Before I catch myself and remember, I have to actively fight against that kind of prejudicial thinking. I would invite and challenge all of us to increase our level of honesty tonight. Every white person I've talked to about this admits that they too sometimes have prejudicial thoughts they are not proud of. The level of progress we've made on race needs to be part of our conversation about what we should teach our children. My concern is that if we ban something intentionally branded by political operatives as critical race theory, without an honest dialogue about what's going on with us, we will continue to hurt our children. My children need to learn that racism of the past was bad, that there were people who looked like themselves who cooperated with others to make things better. Thank you.
All right. So again, it's a 3-step process. Y'all heard the steps. Connect on common values. Talk about your racist training and how it sometimes comes out of you. And then talk about the problems in recognizing racial progress, either in your family, in the community, or in the nation, if these CRT bans happen. Now, and call for more dialogue. This isn't that simplistic, right? You're not trying to say, oh, you're wrong, you're stupid, and don't you see how racist the society is, or you are? It's a whole different way of engaging that conversation. So, and you're calling for more dialogue. And part of what we suggest that you do is to, even in a public meeting, to bring this to bear, to kind of like, you're gonna throw them off their game. They're not used to this kind of truth telling happening in a public setting. So imagine if you were to organize a few people to do this, and they're integrating into concise statements, still within the 3-minute time limit. They're doing this level of confessing and inviting other people to do that as part of our understanding what we're doing here. It's a whole different, it's going to throw them off their game. And you're suggesting to the decision makers, we need more discussion about this to find the common ground. So that's what we're going to teach you how to do in a week and a half.
And it's really important that in doing that, you're shifting this from I'm not racist, the problem is everybody over there, to, yeah, I've been affected by this too. Everybody in this room has. And so we really should be having the conversation about how do we talk to our kids about race, because what happened in my generation around it being about color blindness and we don't talk about race didn't work. If it had, we wouldn't be in the racial reckoning that we're having right now. And so it's an invitation to do better by the next generation of children.
So I just want to say, just to make sure I get this in our pre-survey that we did, about 20% of the people were people of color coming to this meeting. We don't know, who's got the camera on, who doesn't. Certainly this method can be used by people of color. It's just harder, and there's just subtleties to it, right? And we will talk about those as well. So just to be very transparent, one of the things that people of color can potentially do using this method, which is inherently, which let's be clear, it was designed for white folks to leverage their privileged status in a society, but people of color can use it, but it's based on best practice principles. One option is for in the racism part for people to talk about a moment where they were victims of racism that basically is hard to dispute. But even more effective is to talk about some moment where they notice themselves having anti-Black bias. So those of you taking our courses, you know that like I have things that I talk about on that. That's harder to do, right? It requires a lot of vulnerability. This is work people of color shouldn't be doing, but there's a whole bunch of things people of color shouldn't have to deal with that we got to deal with, right? So that would be really hard for a white person to deny to say, oh, that's not true, when a person of color is admitting that. But as a general matter, this strategy is obviously designed to leverage to be useful for white allies to execute, although people of color can't execute it.
Right. We don't ignore the fact that we know that the burden of shifting all of these conversations really needs to be owned by the white community, because it should at this point in time.
But it's a longer conversation. But
it is a longer conversation.
I am becoming sadly, I'm more and more concluding that in order for the anti-racist community in order for white folks who think racism is real to start talking more honestly about how racism is impacting them, how they're still carriers of virus, it might be the case that people of color got to start admitting that. But that's a whole other conversation about whether that's necessary or not. It certainly isn't good, but that might be what's really required to give white folks like y'all permission to start doing that publicly. But that's a separate conversation.
That is a separate conversation at the after party.
There you go. So, all right. So we're at 9 minutes left. So, Allison, you think we should just sort of, I mean, we've done.
I think what we need to do is to spend a few minutes talking about how different this approach is if you are going to use it in a conversation than if you're going to make a 3-minute speech that you can prepare at home, get all of your points down on paper, and then basically show up at a meeting and speak it. Commanding and managing a conversation intentionally on this topic is a bit of a different animal. So I think we should talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so imagine you've gotten your 3 elements together, right? And you're talking to your brother who you see now and then about this, and he's all agitated about CRT. So you still go through those elements, but you don't do them in 3 minutes, right? You have a conversation about values that what they're concerned about, and then you are listening to that. You're listening to him or listening to your brother or whoever it is, and you're finding those points that you agree with, right? And so they have authentic concerns, as well as they've been ginned up to have specific concerns by the organizers, right? Who have a particular manual and things that they try to get people to talk about. And you can see those coming up in meetings, but they're concerned that their kids are going to be looked at through a racial lens. I mean, it's not only through a racial lens. That's not shocking, right? And it's not completely crazy that they might be concerned about that. Well, it's okay for you to speak to that concern. You probably don't want that either. That concern, you consider them being overblown, but you could potentially meet that concern. And ultimately what you're trying to do in the conversation is to try to let them know, I don't think you're completely a fool, because people feeling like you think they're a fool is not helpful for persuasion. So your goal in a conversation is to kind of find points of commonality and meet that as much as possible. In order to do that, that's why we suggest, people taking our course, we suggest the RACE method, starting out with reflect, which means calm yourself down so you can, in fact, make strategic conversational choices. So to decide, I'm not going to, at the points of commonality, I'm not going to focus on how he's wrong, I'm focusing on what's in common. So it's almost like a spiritual, emotional self-management thing. So there's that. Then you do enough of that, that might be a whole conversation before, and it might be the next time you move to the other thing, right? This has been a great conversation. Let's talk about this again. And what your goal is to have the conversation such that they don't mind having it again. Might be the same conversation. Then you shift towards that truth telling, right? And it's not about I can admit it, what's wrong with you? It's more like, let me tell you, I had this training. Did you have a training like that? You might even separate out the training part. What were we taught as kids? What do we have to let go of? So you're boiling the meal more slowly than you're gonna do it at a meeting, right? So that's more like a microwave style, right? You're having them talk about their training, what they had to let go of. And then, but the thing that you do different, that less what to do is to talk about how it still impacts you. So you got to be prepared to tell your one or two or more stories about how that still comes out of you sometimes. And then, does that ever happen to you? And obviously that there's a relationship between what are we teaching our kids and what's the reality of our racial teaching and our racial reality. And that's what you're trying to get real on in the conversation, and they're not used to doing that. But you're trying to invite them with a little bit of a dare involved to be more honest about that. That's the middle part. Again, it might be its own. That might be two conversations, right? Both the training and the confession part. And then later, it's the last phase is, well, I worry about these bands because, and I'm suggesting you center white children. I want white children to understand the progress. And because part of what these bands do is to make racism not so bad in the past, right? So what we are suggesting you do is to lift up the importance of people recognizing how far we have come. Again, a subterranean thing is y'all don't want to recognize progress, and a whole bunch of people on the left tend not to do that because we think if we recognize it, people take that too far. So you want to counter that. You want people to see the progress. In order to see the progress, you got to know how bad it was in the past. And you want them to see it either in their family or in their community, i.e. their white racist heroes, knowing a local anti-race, unrecognized white anti-racist hero in the past might be valuable to make the point that white people it's not been all bad. So you're highlighting that because part of what they fear is that white people arbitrate is bad. Well, no, but if you diminish the disease of racism, white people can't be good in that because you're not even talking about it, right? And then, of course, in the nation. So that's in the conversation. You can see in the conversation that this might not happen in one conversation, but it's still based on some key points which you need to prepare to do, which we're not trained to do. But in what we'll do in the training.
So I just want to make a point, David, because you've used the word training a lot. And you're in one instance, you're talking about people's training in terms of their upbringing. What were you taught by your parents, your grandparents, your teachers, all of that? So what was part of your upbringing where you either directly or indirectly got these messages of anti-Black bias? And what are your memories of those? Sometimes there's some exercises that you can go through to help jar those memories and bring them up to the surface, and we'll do some of that in the training that we're offering.
Yes. Sorry. You're right. I won't use that word. Thank you, Allison. Yeah.
We're very close to the end of the hour. There was some talk in the chat about Ibram X. Kendi. I just want to share the quote with you all. And I don't have, it was part of the slideshow that we didn't get to tonight, but what he said was, the heart of racism is denial. The heart of anti-racism is confession. He made that quote before he wrote his book, and we always include that in our training because we know that confessing about anti-Black bias is such an important part of moving people and moving the needle on this. Thanks for the finger snap, Bill. And so before we close, we do want to invite everyone to come to the longer training. We are offering anyone that attended tonight a discount code to attend that training. If you go to thedialoguecompany.com and go, let me get this link up for you. You can go there and look at it, and then let me tell you, I created a discount code so that this group can have access to the course at half price, which is about $20.
This is the last time you got half off or something. You ain't getting that very often.
CRT
you don't get that very often.
This is the code to put people in at half price. I want you all to know that David and I are getting a lot of grief from our business manager about offering these free workshops and doing these discounted workshops. But we are so passionate about getting more people into the movement, more good people like all of you into this movement and getting just sharing this information. And so please tell your friends, tell everyone, share that discount code. We don't care, but don't tell our business manager. Stop the recording.
Is there a time limit on the code? Did you put time limit on the code, Alice?
Yes, it expires on Saturday at midnight.
All right. So we want y'all to join the course. We want to see y'all. We want you to learn the skills. And again, we will focus, the conceit of the training will be, we're going to teach you those 3 elements. But we will talk about how to use those in conversation, but it's a big shift enough to just be able to deliver those 3 things. You saw how beautiful the way Kelly did that in 3 minutes, right? Everybody on here can do that, but it's such a shift to try to control those elements. So we're going to focus on preparing you with those elements, which then you can use either in a meeting, which 30 y'all want to do, or in a conversation.
Yes, and if you've never been in a training with me and David, I just want you to know that that it's actually pretty fun. We will make it more entertaining than tonight. We will polish up our jokes, and we'll be ready to keep things moving during that training, and you will learn something. We'll have some handouts.
I feel like I'm buying a car. Let me check with my manager. There you go. Don't tell the manager. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and we want to honor your time. We are so grateful to all of you who joined us tonight. It is always a pleasure to be with people who are, we would think, are on the right side of history. You have every reason to be concerned about what's going on with the CRT thing. It's like when we watched the Tea Party roll in and take over government. It's the same kind of thing. And so we really look forward to having you all join our movement and to seeing you on future events with the Dialogue Company. We'll do other free things.
What I just put in the chat was our flyer, which we would love for you to post on social media, the flyer promoting this. So feel free to download that and open it, download it, and then post on social media, because this is so important, and people need strategies that have a basis in what we know about persuasion and dialogue, which is more effective in moving people.
Okay.
Okay. So we will stop the official recording. It's 9:02.
That I think could really help in the dialogue with other people in the community, because the only voices that are happening, like you said, the school board meeting is really not a place to have a conversation.
No,
the only voices being heard there are one side, right? It's just anti-mask, anti-CRT,
when you're talking to 50 people as opposed to one, you're disinclined to look at the degree to which your belief might be a little bit wrong. People are not doing that in front of 50 people. Like that's in any case, much less 100, much less when the media is watching, right? You come with your prepared statement and you make it. We are trying to elevate those statements, but as a general matter, people are not having that conversation in a way. People are not approaching that moment in a way that is at all dialogic. So maybe what you want to do is to have a different type of meeting where people are at tables talking to each other. There's a facilitator who's trying to help people talk to each other, not at each other. To look at where are our common values, where are our common concerns, right? That's what you want to foster. It's going to be hard to do that in a roll up to the microphone meeting.
Right. And unfortunately, in my district, they get 4 minutes, so they can go real long. Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Sure. Any other? Who else wants to throw in something or ask a question?
want to hear from one of these other David Camps.
I know, I'm tired of that one David Camp. He talks too much.
So I've got a question. It's not specifically regarding CRT. So if you'd rather not address it, that's fine. Our Chamber of Commerce just met in person for the first time since COVID. And I had my ears up for how we're responding. I live in a very white community. I'm so not proud of it. Rufo actually relocated and lives in my community. So I get to practice open-heartedness or something. But anyway, my ears were up. We were talking about meaningful movies. And I simply said, I really wish we had more diversity present. That statement created defensiveness among the business people at my table. It wasn't like a big deal. Somebody just said, what do you mean? But you can kind of feel that energy behind it. And the way I responded, just because of who our community is that I had hoped to see more young people, younger people participating. And they said, well, yeah, and they laughed and they said it was an older crowd. But I could tell they expected
to pounce on you.
Say something else. I kind of veered in another direction. Shortly after that, I had a conversation with a man sitting next to me. We were talking about other chambers, and he indicated how many people are socially active and that they're just taking over the chambers, and coming in and talking about what's going on and trying to soak them for money, and that it's ruining our Chamber of Commerce's. So, it wasn't about CRT. It was more about racism and anti-racism, the way that I was hearing that. And what I walked away with is I was dipping my toe in the water, but I didn't know how to, it was all covert. It was all underneath, and I didn't know how to address it more authentically. So again, if that's beyond the scope of
let's go to the let's go to the core of our method. The core of our method, the race method, is reflect, ask, connect, expand, right? So reflect, calm yourself down, ask somebody for an experience question related to their belief, connect, find something in common with them that you have, some feeling you have that in common, and then expand, own up to some problematic thinking that you might have or have had in the past that might invite them to new thinking. So in this case, let's deal with the second one on these people coming in. So they're talking about people on the left coming in and making all sorts of demands for more diversity, right? That's what they're talking about, right? So again, this strategy is it's based on the possibility of extended contact, and sometimes you can't finish the whole thing in one sitting, and you might have to do it over a period of time. But sometimes conversations advance. So find out basically it's to say more about that. What are you talking about, right? What's his experience related to that? How the people are coming in, it's causing him a problem, right? So get him to talk about some experience. The truth is, if he actually, you get him to tell some experience, that will probably increase your empathy, because empathy is increased when people tell stories from the experience as opposed to just like state opinions. So that's valuable. Now, if you knew you were going to see him again, here's what I advise you to think about. Think about some time in which you have felt that some people who didn't know enough, or people who were new, came into some situation and were starting to alter it. Like they were encroaching on territory that you had. You probably have felt that, even if it wasn't around people on a different political view. You have probably felt that feeling. So what you'd want to do in this kind of conversation is to, after he talks about that, even though he's talking about like not liking these people with other ideologies coming in, you can identify with, I've sometimes felt like the new people, they don't know what they're doing. They have different values and approaches. So you're not crazy. I understand that feeling, right? That's the connect step. Okay. What might the expand step be? Well, here's where like you're having some thinking about what's a kind of a confession about bias that you're willing to state is useful to have done in advance. That's the reflect step is not only calm down, it's also get your stories ready. Okay, so part of what you could think about, again, if you were preparing for this, and it's useful to think about this anyway, are there times in which you felt like the way a culture is changing bugs you and you find yourself resisting it? So a standard, one of the stories I tell about that is I went to Portland one time, and I was there for I was going to be for a couple of days. And after I rented my car, I'm driving to my hotel, and I listen. I'm in the middle of the radio dial, and I hear a Latino station, a Spanish music station. Okay, press forward, hear another one. Press forward, hear another one. I'm like, what's going on here? Where's the country music? Where's the classical music? Where's the rap music? I don't like any of those types of music. But I'm feeling displaced, right? So so that's or another example is I've reduced the portion of time in which I'm bugged by press 1 for English. It used to be like 3/4, now it's down like 1/3 because I've made some accommodations in my head about that. But the point is that I can identify with the culture is changing. It makes me uncomfortable. It's not what I'm used to. It's all these other people who have a whole other ways of being. And so part of this is just one potential example to say, I have felt that, and I know what that is. And part of what might be going on is that feeling, which I can understand because I felt that. So I'm just saying, by saying that, you're inviting him to consider that his reaction is not unlike yours, not like yours has been. So I'm just saying, this strategy, you notice, this isn't a slap the person down strategy. This is a different kind of sidle up to him and agree and then say, but there might be other things going on here that make us uncomfortable that we got to be honest about if we're going to look at it comprehensively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. That's very helpful. And being in the business community, I run against those kinds of, I mean, it's everywhere, right? But I run into those kind of conversations regularly. And as we're more in person, I'm pretty confident that I'll see more of those.
So I'll say one more, then we get kicked to get to other people. So if you're a business person, so you can think about whether or not in the past you've ever done the following. Sometimes I know that just from doing a whole bunch of trainings with a whole bunch of people and knowing how bias works, sometimes what can happen is like somebody manifests a certain behavior, you have a certain lens you see it through, you judge them negatively, and then you later on realize, I'm just looking at them negatively because of some training I had from when I was a kid or whatever, right? Or something happened to me whatever years ago. But we don't, the issue is admitting that, right? So if you're trying to invite somebody to see how bias can work, what you want to do is to have some example of when you were biased and then came to a different understanding. We're not trained to do that. We're trained to hide that. And that's very dysfunctional to the process of expanding on people who recognize that bias can affect them. Because if bias is always something that somebody else is doing, those moral reprobates, who are going to admit that? Part of the shift is we start becoming more comfortable admitting, yeah, I had that kind of moment, and I had to recognize that's just not who I want to be. It's out of sync with my values, but we don't like to admit that. But us not admitting it keeps the problem in place.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So any other comments, especially from, I know that there's a person named David Camp who put the camera on. But anybody wants to throw in something, that'd be great.
I'm curious about how those conversations are going to unfold. You start with the, confessional bit and, the values bit and the expand, bit, and so frequently, whenever you see these conversations in the press, in media, podcasts or whatnot, they start at some level of agreement or trying to sometimes, and they quickly unpeel the onion, and it becomes pretty clear that what the anti-CRT folks are about is not CRT. Like I said, they've picked up this talking point. They're swatting at a bogeyman, but they really don't want history taught. They don't want anything that reflects badly on white people in history. They think it's living in the past, it's rehashing all that stuff we've already solved, and they have a million things that they want to say. So even if you try to dispense, let's get this away from CRT, well, all you're going to do is unpeel the onion, and at some point they're going to admit, that.
Yeah, but here's
thing.
so I got you. I'm not saying. I mean, of course, our dialogue methods are awesome, but they're not miracles. But here's a suggested framing to shift some of that. Everybody has people 2 generations back who are more racist than them. Like even people in the Klan got people 2 generations back were more racist than them, right? So part of what we try to encourage people to do is to, as I said earlier, is to acknowledge racial progress and to have people meet on the ground of, hasn't there been progress that we can all feel good about? So in this particular situation, yeah, people don't want to talk about what happened 60 years ago. You have to get them past that, and one way to try to get them past that is to talk about, like, weren't you taught stuff? Didn't your grandmama ever teach you things that you had to let go of because they were too racist? Don't you want your kids to recognize the progress that you have made? Don't you want to, right? If you whitewash all that, they can't see that, right? So it's a and like I said, this is a productive disruption of typical discourse, because people on the left we don't like to acknowledge progress, because we think if we acknowledge it, then the men should take a mile, right? So this is a different kind of jujitsu in that.
Yeah. I like that.
Can't see, if the past was that great, then we can't feel good about being better, and that includes you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see you on the 23rd. Thanks, folks. Good night.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to throw in?
This is Chandra. Can I ask a question?
Oh my God, Chandra from Detroit.
How are you?
Chandra and I used to work together. Hey Chandra, how you doing?
I am doing well. I had a conflict, and so I joined, I think, right around 8:30, 8:35, and just wondering if tonight's session is going to be recorded, or if there's any materials coming out. Okay.
We're going to record it and kick it out to people. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just had that very simple question, and thank you for the invitation, and definitely excited to continue hearing about your work.
It's great to see you, and I would assume is
my son. Yep.
There you go. All right. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
See you. Thank you so much. Spread the word.
I will.
All right. What's on your mind? The David Camp who wears the appears to be a Black woman who wears glasses.
I've been trying to get in on the conversation for quite some time. So tonight I just got in enough to listen. So I'm still listening.
What's your name?
I'm Josephine Bowling McCall.
Okay, Ms. Bowling McCall, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Yeah, so Yeah, our methods, as you might have heard me say, our methods can be used by people of color. It's just a little harder because, you know, like the whole notion of somebody says something racially problematic and you lean into the connection. Like that's just harder for people of color to do. It's not impossible. A lot of people of color have gotten value out of our approach, but it's more emotional work. It's harder. It's not impossible though. So, you know, there's more work on us anyway. Same as it ever was, right? So yeah. So I appreciate you coming.
Well, my father, Elmore Bolin, was included in the 1619 project.
Oh.
And when all of the states started voting that you cannot discuss CRT, that's when I really became interested, because I was so enthusiastic about his having been included. My father was lynched when I was 5 years of age, and I wrote a book about it.
Oh, wow.
And it's called The Penalty for Success. My father was lynched in Miles County, Alabama. And Tremaine Lee did an interview with me some time ago, and he followed up and included into the 1619 project.
Who did that?
Trymaine, Tremaine Lee.
Oh, Tremaine. Oh, yeah, Tremaine. Yeah, right. Wow. Wow. Well, man, obviously that's horrible. And I understand how you have a strong connection to wanting to fight this ridiculous pushback, because this has touched you personally. So, yeah. Bless you for your turning that energy into something that helps society.
Thank you.
So I want to give Jay Carey a chance to throw in and ask a question or comment.
I'm good. I'm just hanging out.
All right. Jay?
Thank you so much.
Sure. I probably should go pay attention to my dad, because I come over and do work at night, and he's like, what about me? So I need to go take care of him. So thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it. And again, I hope to see y'all on 23rd. And if you can't, that's a rhyme. Hope to see you on 23rd. If you can't, spread the word. So, all right, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't take it easy. All right.